Daniel,
Michelle,
OG
OG
Rose, and we have Reed with us because babies like to be up at 11:30 at night. Why would you go to bed? Why would you do that? And so all the lights are off. Yeah, he's speaking. He's like, because you let me fall asleep in the car on the way
He
back.
basically took a nap at like
8 p.m.
8:30.
So why would I be
PM.
in bed at midnight?
That's not a normal thing. It's just we were
No.
driving, and so
Yes. No, we were coming back
he
from
doesn't
Pulse.
normally nap from
At 8.
At
Oh,
Yeah,
in
like
case you people
yeah, they're
hear
like, what
this.
type of parents are they? Like, they let their child nap at 8:30
We've
p.m.
done this before. This was abnormal. But this is great because it gets into the idea of running a house and the two houses, the little parable on the dilemma today of running a real life and an online life, which feels like running two houses. So then as you clean the bathroom in one house and you get it all together and you feel great, you notice that the other house is falling apart, that you haven't updated your profile, that you haven't posted anything new in a long time, that your website is behind. So then you run over to the other house, fix your website, bring it all up to specs, and notice that the grass at the other house has not been cut and your neighbor is staring at you as if you're an irresponsible person. And so you run over and cut the grass, and there's always, it basically feels today like you have two different lives that you are managing, these two different houses. And of course, when it comes to all the online stuff, it just looks like you're sitting there working on your screen. You're just staring at your screen. You
could be playing Candy Crush for all anyone knows.
Yeah, that's right. So so there's an existential crisis where you're like, I'm not just sitting here playing Candy Crush, but people can't know that. It's like, well, of course you would just say that you're not just sitting there playing Candy Crush. So it's this very interesting dilemma, kind of existential dilemma, but also like all the different things when it comes to the online stuff, if you're really trying to maintain an internet presence and all the different forms that requires, it's like taking care of a house. But then you have a house that you're supposed to take care of. If taking care of one doesn't necessarily take care of the other.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, the parable, it's a great image there, of the maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
The maintenance that goes into taking care of a home and taking care of all that goes into it. And I think, until you have done it yourself, it's hard to quite understand exactly what all that goes into it, really. Right. I mean, obviously I don't understand what it's like there's lots of things that nobody has the experiential on, but it's like I think about my parents, and I feel like I've hopefully was always grateful for the things I did, but now I really start to when you have to manage it yourself, then you're like, wow, I should be extra thankful for all the things that they do and all the things that you that go into it. And so to taking care of a home, just to keep things clean, to all of that, there's really a lot to it. Fixing doorknobs, if you do a vegetable garden, there's right. then suddenly you've got 100 tomatoes, you need to do something with your tomatoes. So and then like with the virtual too, there is a lot. Like I do think that today the average person might feel a little bit more inundated, and maybe like we were talking, Daniel, that's why people, because so much is like the heavy bulk of stuff is virtual.
Right.
Maybe that's why people often are like, yeah, I'll just like get an apartment and kind of keep things like simple on that side of things, and then just have more time to do the virtual.
That's right. Because you start feeling like you have to make those choices between the virtual and the real. And different things. So it's like right now trying to do this podcast as Reed has decided to start climbing around, right? So you're trying to do something on the virtual while maintaining the real.
Yeah. And I do think like sometimes I wonder because he said I just wanted some extra snuggles and maybe to get featured on your podcast.
Yeah, that's what it was. But no, you see that where people, like you got the apartment, there is a sense in which maintaining that entire internet presence is like a job. And what's funny, like if you have a family or a house, the people on the internet just see the fact that you haven't posted anything new on YouTube in a long time. They don't know that you're trying to keep the house from being destroyed by termites, or trying to make enough to pay for the healthcare bills or the insurance or different things. Mm-hmm. Where then on the flip side, if you're taking care of the termites, well, if you're not taking the people who see your real life, they're like, oh, they haven't finished taking care of the paint or the little lawn or something, and they don't see all of the countless hours you're putting into editing a document to make sure it's all well, because somebody reads your Medium article and there's two typos. That's the only thing they talk about. And how could you dare to post something that has a then and a then? You got those mixed. This is the sloppiest writing I've ever seen. And people have that, or they walk into your house and like, when was the last time you vacuumed? This is the sloppiest rug I've ever seen. Because people have that tendency.
In that exact voice.
Oh yeah, the exact voice. It embodies whoever's
strange,
doing
actually. It's kind of weird. It's always that exact voice.
I guess the Legion character from, what was it? Legend with Tom Cruise or whatever, that devil character. That's what it was. But anyway, so there is this kind of where the millennial finds himself, especially younger, who's finding so much of work now has to be online. They can feel split between two houses and maintaining two houses, which I do think has a unique existential tension to it.
Yeah, and anxiety really to it. I think for sure in that place. And I mean, I think that it can feel like they are sometimes like feel very much at odds with each other.
Oh yeah.
And well, obviously it's like, well, that sort of feels that like it is more real, but at the same time, the work that you're doing in a virtual platform, I mean, I think especially for people who are doing creative works, that's where you're going to have some access, right, to a type of audience. Now you could just like walk to the corner of your street and start hollering, I guess.
Right,
I don't know.
hope
we
that
just
millionaire hears.
We actually try to do both.
Yeah,
we go out
try
on,
to
like,
diversify.
we walk down the road. We walk down the country road and just put up a little box and then stand on it and just like read like our O.G. Rose articles.
Be like, Hegel, was Heidegger an existentialist? Aunt Betty, please come out your house.
Miss Heggie, please
sit in your lawn chair.
Please sit in your lawn chair.
Hegel and the pure thought, please. Oh no. Whatever works. But yeah, you gotta get your stuff out there. So there's
and so I think that's why.
So you're trying to so you're maintaining two houses.
Yeah, I think it's just the reason why you do the virtual is so that you can just share what you're making, essentially.
Oh, yeah. And then on your computer, even the writing, even doing the work is on the computer.
That's true. So it's like it might not be connected to, like, the internet, but it's more of this virtual space because it's, on your computer.
Well, I mean, this gets us into the difference between continuous work and completable work, which I think kind of highlights some differences between millennials and maybe older generations. And what I mean by this is, like, we had that piece on boomers and millennials and, the clickbait stuff, I guess. So, where continuous work is like, there's always emails to do. If you're doing coding, there's always coding to be done. But completable work is like like at the wholesale, filling a cooler with boxes. There's eventually a finite reality that restricts how many boxes you can put in the cooler.
Right.
And so there's a feeling of completeness. Where, like, with internet stuff, it's, like, continuous. And so there can be, like, more of an existential kind of tension to it because you never get that feeling of completeness.
Right. Well, there's always more you can do. There's always more, there's
marketing,
always...
posts,
there's always... And, like, marketing, great example. There's always something more you could do to market your product or whatever you're trying to sell or whatever you're trying to put out there. And if you're doing creative works, I mean, let's say you have a book you're trying to get, there's always more you could do, right?
Yeah,
always more you could do. And so it's not limited by really anything except yourself. Like, you're the only one who sets the boundaries. Whereas, like, I'm going to build, I'm going to fix the porch. Now it's fixed. It's done. Now there might be another porch. Yes, that's the whole nature of a job. Like, the plumber has lots of...
But the one porch is done.
Yes, but the one porch is done, and you get that feeling of completion. You have the sense of completion, and it is literally complete in that in that particular job you have to do.
Yeah, and I mean, arguably you can finish your book, you can finish your project, but then you have to do the marketing and you have to get it out there, so it just goes and goes and goes with internet work. So I mean,
the virtual work is
much more continuous.
It's not contained, it's not bound really.
Yeah, and obviously these categories blur and they go together.
They cross
but when you fill a cooler with boxes or you do physical tasks and they're completable, you can get this feeling of, I finished the job. It closes the loop per se. It gets off your mind. You're done with it. But with continuous work, it's never off your mind. And so essentially, completable work, involving the physical work and things like that, could be more tiring, but continuous work can be more existential. So there's sort of a trade-off between it because you put it well. Continuous work only stops when you choose to stop it.
Right.
But then you have to ask, why did I stop at X point and not Y point? Why am I stopping? Maybe I'm not working hard enough. Maybe I could do more.
Exactly.
So where completable work, when the cooler's done, reality itself forces you to stop.
Exactly.
You're absolved of the responsibility of stopping. You don't have to wonder why you stopped at one point and not another.
Well, you don't have the you're not responsible for deciding it's finished.
Yes, that's right.
It's decided for you.
Yes.
And that's why there's less existential angst with that, because it's done. There's an end point.
Well, the other issue that happens is your boss, if you're working for someone, your boss can't ask you to fill the cooler more than is physically there.
Right.
But your boss can make you feel like you should do your emails faster. You should do one more meeting. You should take one more call.
Sure.
Because why wouldn't you if you want to work? And it actually goes to show you that just the principle of work hard in a continuous job, like just work hard, is actually not enough of a principle.
Well, like in the virtual,
in the virtual
work, it's not,
because it never ends.
It
You can be exploited. You'll lose your work-life balance and all these different things.
Well, sure, and I mean, and also like it's almost like you'll lose your humanity in the end of it,
absolutely.
Because you'll have no bounds to anything, and that's why there is more of a responsibility to make the boundaries yourself. Which again is existential, but it's kind of like, if you know that, I think it's easier to accept that.
Yeah, you don't feel as bad.
And I think you can realize like this is an aspect of this type of work, and it's just a part of it. It's something I'm going to have to accept.
Yeah, I'm not doing something wrong.
And I'm not doing something wrong, exactly.
And the boss, whoever the boss is, or if you ran a company, you would know that you will always feel like more should be done or more could be done.
Sure.
And then you'll know, well, that's just part of the game. And yeah, it's really important to realize this, because if we're talking about the two houses, one internet, one real, well, one house is continuous work, the other is completable work, although arguably when you're taking care of a house or a job with kids, there's always something to do.
Right.
But even those physical tasks, the kitchen is indeed clean. It's kind of finishable, and like I said, they kind of overlay.
Well,
basically.
I wonder if the risk, the thing that can be challenging with the continual, is like it's just a constant on.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the key difference in some respects is that continual work, which would mean work that you could theoretically always do, is work that you always have responsibility over your choice relative to.
Exactly.
Completable work, the fact that is completable or bound by finite time and space, then absolves you at certain points of the fact that you stop working or the fact that you finish the task. And I think this is really important to realize, because it means that there's just a very different and unique psychological reality that average people today are having to deal with, that in older generations, perhaps they had more physically demanding work, but they had less could have had generally less existentially demanding work. And if we don't realize that shift, we're going to misdiagnose perhaps some problems that we're having in society, what people are going through. We'll say, well, you just need to finish your tasks. You need to just have work-life balance. You hear this advice, like, have a work-life balance. Well, that's really, really difficult when all of your coworkers expect you to answer your email at 10 at night, because you could. And if you don't, because you have your phone, and if you don't, what does that say about you? You must not be a good teammate. In continuous work, all of your choices are constantly reflecting back on you. Right. What does it say about you? And so it's much more psychologically difficult.
Absolutely, yeah. But I do wonder, it's almost like we have the existential anxiety of the constant on of work, the incompletable work.
Well, the way that you live your life always seeps into all areas of your life. And I mean, that's what's going on, right? If you have a kind of continuous work where that never feels completable, then you never feel complete, and then you have a disposition to the world that assumes incompleteness.
Well, wouldn't you sort of be like, for those who feel that way, shouldn't they be kind of closer to embracing the lack?
Not if you have an overall macro view of the world that lack is always bad, or that lack always needs to be addressed with being. Right. The entire concept of integrating with lack or accepting lack is very counterintuitive versus what you usually hear. So you would not necessarily draw that conclusion when you experience lack. In fact, what you would conclude is that there's something wrong with you. So that's what tends to happen, is people in continuous work, because they have a work ethic or moral system of work that comes from an age of completable work. Well, then they go into continuous work with those same values, And so then they just try to work hard and work harder than everyone else and do what they're supposed to do and get their tasks done. And they find that those ethics don't work because the work never ends. There's always more to be done. And so you need a different set of principles by which to approach that. And if you're going in with the wrong principles, then you don't get very far. Yeah, and I mean, on the two houses things, problematically, if one house is completable work, or more so, and the other is continuous work, then you're led to believe that both, if one house is completable, then you bring that way of thinking into the other house. Yes. Try to operate as if it's completable, and when it's not, you feel like there's something wrong with you. Yes. So then that could be then tempting to burn one of the houses down because you think there's something wrong with it.
Yes. Instead of just kind of recognize their essential differences.
Yeah.
You know?
And when you burn one house, then you're out of the game. You're either out of the game of the internet or you're out of the game of real life, which maybe is best to be out of. I mean, people are making those decisions, but the key notion here is to understand that each house has a different set of rules, per se, a different set of principles.
And then it's up to the person to decide, you know,
what they want to do with that.
They should be completely out of the virtual world in the real world doing completable work. But I think that when you realize the rules are different for the virtual work versus the real life work, and you have these two houses, you can it can be, at least you can acknowledge, okay, this is the way it is actually, and so I'm going to operate on different rules with the virtual versus the real, and then also accept that basically you're never going to, in terms of how it looks, it's not necessarily ever going to look it feeling like you're doing a good job at it. I think a lot of it has to just come from the inside, the sense of am I completing what I can and doing to the best of my ability. There's a lot of housekeeping virtually or in reality.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, and if you try to bring one set of house rules to one house versus the other, you could have some trouble.